I wanted to introduce Julie Davenport. She is our district forester around the Skowhegan area. She's a great resource. Some of you probably have already met her. She has a new little baby, so that's lots of fun. Julie, you want to tell us a little bit about how long you have been a district forester and anything like that, and then you can get started on your presentation.
Sure. So like Terry said, my name is Julie Davenport. I'm the district forester for the Western Maine area. So all of Franklin County, some of Somerset, some of Androscoggin, some of Kennebec. Anyway, I have been with the Maine Forest Service since the fall of 2019. And before that, I have worked for over 4 or 5 years in the forest products industry. So, managing various aspects of forest management for folks. So anyway, I'm going to be covering some of the various programs that different landowners can be involved in. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera while I do that because I get really distracted by the video of myself in the corner. So without further ado, I guess I'll try to figure out if I can share my screen.
Yes, I see it.
Okay, excellent. All right, so programs for woodland owners. What I'm going to do here is we end up getting a lot of questions about tree growth. So it's going to be kind of tree growth heavy. I'm going to talk kind of for the first half about tree growth tax law and then a little bit lighter on some of the other topics. But this is an overview of just some of the topics that I'm going to talk about. So getting started, tree growth is one of the current use tax programs that the state has. They're all available anywhere in the state, but they are administered by the town assessors, and in the unorganized townships, they're run by the Maine Revenue Service. So they're not put in place by the Maine Forest Service. They are not they're a state program run by towns, basically. They all have different eligibility requirements, and the point behind them is to basically pay less taxes based on what you're doing with your land. Kind of the catch with those is that all of them will have significant fees if you decide to get out of the program or change the land use, or if you should fail to meet the requirements at any point. So we'll start with so the 3 that I'm going to talk about are farmland, which is bulletin 20, open space, which is bulletin 21, and tree growth, I'm going to talk about the most, which is 19. And if you're so inclined, you can find more information about any of them from the Maine Revenue Service website, which I've got here. And I will get these slides to Terry so that she can get them sent out to you folks. So tree growth, sometimes abbreviated as TGTL for tree growth tax law, has been around since the early 70s. The purpose, I like to say, is you are being taxed for your land as it is growing trees rather than its ability to be potentially house lots, or instead of being taxed for your property's ability to potentially become a Walmart, you're being taxed for it growing trees because that's what it's doing. Some of the other part of that too is just trying to get folks to manage their trees a little bit better. And again, this is administered by the town, not the Maine Forest Service. We're happy to answer lots of questions about it, but it is not our actual program. And another little note about tree growth tax law is that if a property is entered into the program, it stays in the program. So it's tied to the land itself, not the landowner. So if you own a property, put it into tree growth and then sell it, that commitment stays with the land. The new owner will be responsible to comply with the program. So the land itself, basically tree growth gives you a reduced tax rate per acre. The valuations are set by county, excuse me. So different, the 3 different types of forest will have different rates associated with them: softwood, mixedwood, and hardwood. The Maine Forest Service gives input into what those values can be, but they're ultimately determined by the Maine Revenue Service. And they are updated every year. And of course, you can look up the rates per acre for your county and figure out what they would be just by multiplying the rate per acre times the number of acres that you have in each category. So the requirements to meet the tree growth tax law are as follows. You need to have a minimum of 10 forested acres, and that's key that it's forested. If you have 10 acres and you have buildings on 2 of them, you will not be able to be part of the program because you do not have 10 forested acres. Acres that have buildings on them or other types of improvements will not be able to be compliant. Your primary objective needs to be that you will be growing and harvesting forest products. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slides. You need to have a current forest management plan and harvest plan, and it needs to be updated or recertified every 10 years, and that involves the help of a licensed forester to do so. So I mentioned commercial forest products. That doesn't necessarily mean logging specifically. That's certainly the most common, but any number of these different forest products can count. So that can be Christmas trees, maple syrup. You can cut and sell firewood. The key to that is that it is a commercial forest product. So that commercial is not defined in the statute. It's left up to the interpretation of the assessor, who's in charge of making sure everyone's compliant in the town. So that needs to, I like to tell folks, that kind of needs to pass the straight face test. If you tap 7 maple trees and you create a pint of maple syrup a year, it's going to be kind of a hard sell to say that that's commercial. Whereas if you have a full-fledged operation and you're exporting sap to be boiled somewhere else, for instance, that gets a little bit easier to pass the straight face test. But wreath brush, Christmas trees, maple syrup, any of those things can count. Some of the things that wouldn't count that some folks might think of as forest products would be like berries or cones or nuts, mushrooms, things that grow in the forest, but they're not really forest products. So if you're just thinking it comes from a tree, that's kind of key there. And again, the key is commercial. So timber harvesting and tree growth tax law. Some folks have been, I get calls sometimes from folks who don't quite understand, and they think that if the land is in tree growth, it means that they're not allowed to cut wood. It's very much the opposite. On the reverse end of that spectrum, some folks think that you're required to cut wood at certain intervals. There's no requirements for how frequent or how heavy you cut. Basically, what it comes down to is you need to be following what's recommended in your forest management plan, which is typically prepared by a licensed forester. As long as you're following the plan, that's really key. I like to tell folks that if just in an extreme example, if your forestry plan says that you should clear cut half the property in year 2025 and you choose to do nothing for 30 years, you're not going to be compliant. Likewise, if it says that the trees need to grow for another 10-year period and you go in and you cut out 40% of the volume, again, tough to pass that straight face test to say that you're compliant with the plan. So again, just another reminder, the town are the ones who enforce this, the town assessor, so they're going to be the ones who are determining if there's any suspicion that maybe you're not in compliance. They can ask the Maine Forest Service to check into that, and we will come in and compare the plan to what's happening on the ground. But again, harvesting wood when you're in tree growth, definitely not prohibited. And another little note, just because you're in tree growth doesn't mean that you have any more or less requirements to follow any of the standard laws, rules, or regulations for timber harvesting. So there's no free pass or anything just because you're not paying as high a rate of taxes. So how do you get into the tree growth program? If you are new to it and you think you might be interested, if you want to do it this year, I'm sorry to say that you are a day late and a dollar short. The deadline for new parcels to be entered into the program is April 1st. Sure, if you wanted to join for next year, you could do it anytime between now and April 1st. But the way that you get into it is you will need to have a forest management plan and harvest plan prepared. typically prepared by a licensed forester, but at least needs to be signed and reviewed by one. The plan is your property. That's between you and the forester that you hire. That does not need, sorry, my dog's running around. That does not need to be turned into the town or the assessor or the state. No one has a copy of that except you and your forester. So if you lose it, the forester is the person that you should call, whoever prepared the plan. Hopefully they will have one on file. So that's part of it. The other part of it is I've got here on the right side of the screen, which I'm pointing to it, but you can't see that, this is the tree growth schedule. So what this does is it's a little fuzzy and hard to read, I'm afraid, but this is the standard form. So this will be submitted to the town, and it has your ownership information, what the parcel number is, everything like that. And then what's important is it has the breakdown of the actual acreage. So how many acres you have in softwood, how many acres you have in mixedwood, how many in hardwood. And then there's also what's taken out. So what's not suitable for growing trees if it's a wetland. I know somebody asked that question earlier. I had to step away, so I don't know if it was answered. But and then other land that can't be used for forestry, such as, again, like I mentioned before, any area that you have buildings on, fields, gravel pits. If it's not growing trees, it can't be part of tree growth. Long story short. This piece of paper needs to be turned into the assessor. This is what everything is based off of. It's the heart and soul of tree growth, if you will. And accompanying this needs to be a copy of a map, which will usually be prepared by a forester, and that just shows the breakdown of the different acreages and where they are. There's some certain requirements for the map, but typically any forester that you're working with will be very familiar with what needs to be done in order to meet those requirements. So you shouldn't have to worry about that. But the map and the tree growth schedule are the only things that need to be turned into the town. All right. So now that you're in tree growth, how do you stay in tree growth? First of all, you need to basically be following whatever's written in the plan. Hopefully that is something that you and your forester have worked out ahead of time. So there's nothing in there that you don't agree with. Like if you're really, really against herbicides, ideally your forester wouldn't write in that you're going to spray glyphosate for beech regeneration issues. So it's important that you have that conversation with your forester to make sure everybody's on the same page. If the growing cycle on trees is a long time. If over that 10-year period you decide that you want to make some changes, that's okay. It just needs to be documented. You can add an amendment to a plan. It needs to be documented. Write it down. If you have someone other than a licensed forester prepare a plan, it needs to be reviewed. And it needs to at some point be signed off by a forester. And then another requirement is you need to recertify every 10 years. So whatever year you put it in, 10 years from then, you need to have it recertified. If you join tree growth this next upcoming tax year, so 2022, you will need to have it recertified in 2032. What that usually involves is a forester will come out, talk with you, look at the plan, update it if it needs to be, walk around, make sure that you're still following it. If there's any new recommendations or activities, those will be written into the plan. And then that form that I had on the last page there, that a new one of those will be filled out and turned into the town. So every 10 years, they'll get a new copy of that. All right. If, as I mentioned before, tree growth stays with the land, not the landowner. I'm just going to back up really quick. One other note on that 10-year period, in case it wasn't clear, you do not have the option to get out of tree growth after that 10-year period. You're stuck in it. It's a forever thing. Once you're in, you can't get out without paying a penalty. So it's not, I did that for 10 years. I think I'm done with that. I'm not going to renew. That's not how it works. You're in it to win it. Moving on. So as I was saying, stays with the land, not the landowner. Think really long and hard about if you're not in it and you're considering it. If you think you want to sell off a 2-acre house lot, don't recommend it. Because again, it's expensive to get out of. But there's a couple ways that you will get kicked out, basically. So if you were to say you have 40 acres and you want to sell 8 acres off to your neighbor, that land will automatically is not a word, automatically be kicked out of the program because it is no longer compliant. It's not 10 acres, so it's an automatic penalty that will be assessed. So that's just something to keep in mind. If at any point any part of the land does not meet the requirements for tree growth tax law, it will not be compliant and a penalty will be assessed. So if you've just purchased, on the other hand, if you just purchased a new property and it's in tree growth and you're trying to figure out what to do next, you have from the date that you have acquired the property, so your closing date, the date that it all becomes official, you have 1 year to either A, adopt the previous owner's management plan, or B, have a licensed forester either prepare or sign off on a new plan. That is totally up to you. I would recommend that if there's only a year or so left on the plan, it just makes sense to have it updated. A lot of folks will choose to work with the forester who prepared the previous plan, but there's no reason that you have to. If there's someone that you really like working with, you are more than welcome to reach out to them. As long as the licensed forester signs off on it, that's the only thing you need to worry about. And again, you have a year to get that done. Now, getting out of tree growth. So you've got a couple different options if you should so choose that you no longer want to be in tree growth. The first of which would be if you don't want to pay any penalties, you can consider moving it over into one of the other current use programs, which I'll talk just a little bit about open space and farmland in the next few slides. But your other options are to withdraw some or all of the acres and pay the penalty. That penalty will be based on a percentage of the difference between that acre specific value for the land and the tree growth valuation based on when you take it out. So it can change depending on how long you've been in tree growth. So that can be basically the longer it's in, you may find yourself paying more because you have to make up for those back taxes essentially. And you can find the details of that formula itself in Bulletin 19. A lot of times I recommend that folks talk directly with the tax assessor because they're the ones who will be calculating that penalty. You know, it pays to just be upfront and have that conversation. Nobody's going to fault you for looking at the numbers when you try to make an educated decision on what you want to do. At the minimum, you're going to be paying the difference in taxes for the last 5 years plus interest. So again, just kind of trying to drive it home. It's very expensive to get out of. So one of the other programs that you can roll into is the Farmland Tax Law. It's kind of similar to tree growth, only it's for farm properties. Instead of a 10-year minimum, you have a 10-acre minimum. You have a 5-acre minimum. So you can have less land, but the idea is that the primary use of the property as a whole is for farming, agriculture, or horticulture. And one of the requirements is that that property must produce $2,000 a year, and that can be gross. So that doesn't have to be net, that doesn't have to be a profit. You just have to gross that much a year. You can have forest land and other non-farm land as part of it. So forest land specifically is okay. It's typically the same rate assessed per acre of hardwood, softwood, mixedwood, etc. Firewood that you cut off the property does not count towards the income requirement, and you still need to have a map showing the acreages and locations in order to enroll, which I spelled wrong. And every year you need to fill out an income report and turn that into the town assessor. There's no requirement for a forest management plan in the farmland tax program. Next up is the open space program, which is a little bit more complicated. I've kind of got it dumbed down to one slide, but I would strongly encourage that if you're interested in that to get some more information. So there's no acreage minimum. You can have as small a property as you want, but there's a max of 15,000 acres statewide per landowner. And so land in the open space program is either preserved or it is restricted in use in order to provide a public benefit. So there's a couple of different public benefits. They range from conserving scenic resources to having opportunity for the public to be on the property, recreating, hunting, whatever. Some of it is encouraging wildlife for game, and some of it is just encouraging wildlife in general and habitat for certain species. There are no, excuse me, I totally lost my train of thought. But you, again, just like tree growth and farmland, you don't get a discounted rate per acre on areas that have buildings on them. And then there are, so open space is different from tree growth and farmland in that there are different categories. So there's different price points in different categories, and those are listed here at the bottom. So there's just ordinary open space, public access open space, permanently protected open space, forever wild open space, and managed forest. So for the managed forest one, that does still require a forest management plan signed off by a forester. I believe it is also 10 years, each 10 years that it needs to be done. But so there's a lot to open space. Again, if it's something that sounds like that you might be interested in, strongly encourage you to dig a little bit deeper. The Maine Revenue Service has some great resources online on that. I'm going to speak for myself as a district forester, but I feel pretty comfortable saying that if you are interested, reach out to whatever district forester you may be in the area with, and I'm sure they'd be happy to get you on track with some of the information to dig a little deeper in this if you should so choose. So that wraps up the current use programs. I'm going to move into, and again, that was kind of the bulk of this presentation, but now I'm going to touch on some of the other kind of more fun programs, I guess, that are available to forest landowners in the state of Maine. So this is kind of the bread and butter of what we are and do as district foresters. We're kind of a branch of the Be Woods Wise program. This is a program that is done by the Maine Forest Service, and it's kind of got 3 branches. So one is us, the district foresters. I think it was kind of talked to a little bit about what we do, but we offer free meetings. Everything we do is of no cost to the public. I'll just preface by saying that. But we offer on-site visits where we can walk properties with landowners, and we can talk in real time about what you have and what you, not only what you might want to do with it, but what it would be well suited to, which sometimes can be tricky to know if you don't, look at trees all day like some of us. But we also can just offer help and information, interpretation of certain rules and regulations if you have questions on those, just things to think about, get you in touch with folks in different organizations, or give you more information about different programs and stuff that you want to be a part of. Anything like that, we're happy to help. We're just happy to help all the time. Call us anytime, just not at night. Resources and information is kind of another part of the 3-legged stool of being Woods Wise. So there's the Woods Wise Wire, which is an email chain where they send out great info on a reoccurring basis for anybody who wants to be a part of it. Just anybody who really wants to kind of geek out about their forest land, I would totally recommend the Woods Wise Wire. There's also a huge collection of just online resources on the Be Woods Wise page through the Maine Forest Service website. And they also host some programs, educational opportunities. I don't know, maybe some of you heard about this class that you're in right now through the Woods Wise network. It's a really great thing to be part of. And then the third and final aspect of it, which maybe some of you are already familiar with, is the actual Woods Wise program, which is the cost sharing assistance. So we'll talk about that just a little bit. Woods Wise, it stands for, very clever, Wise Incentive for Stewardship Enhancement. Woods Wise. It's a cost sharing tool for woodland resource action plans, which are the RAP plans. So basically there's some funding available that the Maine Forest Service has available to kind of give to landowners to help encourage management on their properties. Folks that qualify for that are those that own between 10 and 1,000 acres. Plans that meet that requirement are considered stewardship plans. RAP plan, stewardship plan, they're kind of one and the same. It depends on who you're talking to and what their background is, but they have to be prepared by someone who's certified as a stewardship forester. And there's a list of those folks. Any one of your district foresters can get that to you, or you can find it online. It means that the forester has gone through a certain training and that they're able to write a plan that will meet the standards of the WoodsWise. And so what that comes down to is basically, excuse me, if you get one of these plans, you are eligible to have some of the cost of it reimbursed. And that is different depending on how many acres you have. So I guess well, I don't want to get too into the weeds on that, but the rough steps that are involved for that would be that if you're an interested landowner, you apply and you're approved based on what's available for funding. You hire a forester and work with them on your property to get it done. It's done when it's paid for, and that's been documented by the landowner and the forester. That's sent in along with a copy of the plan to the Maine Forest Service. So this is very different from tree growth in that we do get a copy of the plan. We look at it. A Maine Forest Service employee will review it. Usually it's the district forester that your property falls under. If it meets the checklist of all the things that we have to verify is there, we will approve it, and then the money will be wired back to you for whatever portion of it is covered based on, again, how many acres you own. A lot of times that comes out to somewhere around half the cost. But again, the Maine Forest Service is the one who is orchestrating that, so we are handling that approval process and then the actual repayment. But the key thing is that you are hiring the forester, paying them in full, and then are reimbursed after the fact. And at the end of the day, you have a great plan that meets the stewardship requirements. So these plans are typically a little bit more involved than just like usually you'll kind of consider like the tree growth plan is the bare bones plan. The stewardship plan is a little bit more involved. There's required topics that are discussed like biodiversity, fire control, forests of regional importance, various things, different tree pests and disease, certain things that just, there's a whole checklist of items that all need to be included in the plan. So that is WoodsWise. The next program that I wanted to talk about, again, just kind of briefly, just kind of as an overview, is the American Tree Farm System. It's kind of got the iconic green and white diamond sign that probably a lot of you have seen before. So you have to be a part of the tree farm program to have that sign. I've had people ask me over the years where they can buy one, but it's not really that simple. So what it is the American Tree Farm System is a federally run program. I think it started at least in Maine back in the 50s. And it's a federal program, but it's run at the state level. So it's really interesting in that the state tree farm committees have their kind of some say in what they do, as far as what they do with the tree farm name and kind of build their own program. So in Maine, we have a lot of say as to how it can work for landowners and what we do with it. But basically, it's a certification program, and it's based on the tree farm standards of sustainability. Those are federally put out. I think they're updated every either 5 or 10 years. I can't remember. But anyway, so this is a little bit, I might be misleading in saying this, but it's a little bit like the stewardship program. You have to meet certain requirements. Usually you have a plan that meets those requirements. The property and the difference here is that after you have the plan, you're not done. The property and the plan are inspected by a tree farm inspector to make sure that you're in compliance, and that's kind of where the certification part of it comes in. So without the certification, you don't get the sign. But the sign is kind of one of the main benefits. I hate to like water it down to that level, but it's a recognition program. So if you see that green and white sign, it's a lot more than a sign. It really represents that you are an exemplary forest manager and that you take good care of your property. You know, you're doing everything you can to make sure you don't have invasive plants taking over the understory and choking out the natural regeneration of the trees, that you're harvesting in a sustainable manner. You're not wiping out crucial wildlife habitat for rare and endangered species. It's kind of like you're in the top tier for forest landowners. And what kind of goes along with that is there's kind of a soft competition. I don't even know if competition is the right word, but the Outstanding Tree Farmer of the Year is something that's done every year. So inspectors will nominate folks in their county, and there's competition between, if ideally someone from each county is nominated, those counties get competed against. You'll have an Outstanding Tree Farmer of the Year for the state, and then that can go on to regionally, and then each year there's one for the entire US as well. So we've had some really great tree farmers in Maine in the last couple of years who have actually made it pretty far up the chain of trying to compete out at the regional and national levels, and so that's pretty cool. But another neat thing that you can do is if you're a member of the tree farm whole shebang, there's a national conference that you can attend where all the tree farmers get together. There's a lot of really cool resources available to tree farmers, just from like cutting edge forest management information to just all the latest and greatest, lots of professionals that you can kind of rub elbows with and get to know. And it's a pretty cool program. If you're really into your forest and you take a lot of pride in how you manage it, Tree Farm is absolutely for you. I would totally recommend it. Definitely a cool program to be a part of. So next up is the Maine Woodland owners. Formerly, the program formerly known as SWOM. I don't know if some of you may be familiar with that. They recently rebranded to be a little bit more inclusive of bigger landowners, so that they weren't only for small landowners or woodland owners. This is a member-supported program, so there's some membership fees associated with that. But those who are members have access to kind of exclusive information, resources, certain trainings that they do for woodland owners, both on site and more like on paper type things. They have like a newsletter. They also have a land trust program, and I don't remember how many acres. I think it was like 10,000 acres that they've already put through their land trust program, which is pretty neat. And there's certain professionals who work with the Maine Woodland Owners group. And then another neat thing that it does is they work on, excuse me, they do a lot of advocating for woodland owners and the best interests of folks who own forest land in the state of Maine. That's kind of a really cool piece of what they do that a lot of folks aren't necessarily doing already. Just take a drink here, excuse me. Right. So moving on to, and I just want to jut into my own presentation really quick to say, I totally recognize that these last couple slides about these programs have been kind of brief and bare bones, but I did just want to encourage, if you have any interest in any of these, definitely reach out to your district forester. They are always going to be happy to get you in touch with folks who can give you more information, or they can just give you more information themselves. I didn't want to drone on for too long. So trying to just cover the basics. But anyway, so this is my final little program that I want to talk about. I say little, it's not little at all. U.S. Department of Agriculture is by far nothing small. But so some of you may be familiar with the NRCS program, the Natural Resource Conservation Service. They have some cost share funding available for landowners for certain practices. They call them conservation practices, and a lot of times what those include is things like wildlife management activities or water quality, soil improvement. So that can sometimes include things like updating stream crossings, putting in open bottom culverts where there was previously like a couple failed crunched up culverts that are impeding fish passage, things like that, or doing certain forest practices to enhance wildlife. One of the things that makes the NRCS stuff kind of tricky to talk about is that the funding changes a little bit from year to year. It's not always available in the same the same amount, as well as the things that they're trying to promote aren't always necessarily the same. So just because you apply doesn't mean that you're going to get awarded the funding. But the nice thing about that is that you can apply every year. So the sooner you get the application in, the better is usually the way that works. But this is not handled. Let me back up. The Maine Forest Service doesn't really have any hands in this. Whereas the woods-wise stuff, that's all us. This is all done at the federal level. So if you're interested in any of these kind of cost share programs, these are specifically for different practices or activities on your property. The best way to get more information about that is to talk to your local NRCS office. Usually there's one per county. I think some of the smaller counties might be doubled up, but the folks there will be happy to get you in touch with people who can help you with the next step. But kind of the quick and dirty on how that works is if you are interested, you can apply. Your property will be given a farm number. That's a little bit misleading. It's not a farm, it's just your forest land, but they call it a farm number because it is the USDA. That's just how they organize all their funding. You have to get a pretty involved plan in place in order to try to apply for this funding for these activities. The plan usually involves inventory on the property, so that'll be done. That has to be done by a forester who's certified as a TSP. That means that they're just capable of producing these higher level plans. Again, they're pretty involved, so there can be a little bit more cost associated with those than some of the average plans. They go into a lot more detail. There'll be a lot of again, like I said, they do an inventory on the actual property, and then have some data calculated about what's actually on the property that helps to guide some of the management goals. That's a requirement, whereas in the other types of plans that we've talked about, that's not required. And again, I just have a note here again that the application does not guarantee that you're going to get funding, but again, no limit on how many times you can apply. So if this sounds like something that you'd be interested in, if building bridges and doing special wildlife management tasks is right up your alley, this may be something you should look into. But I didn't want to get too into the weeds on it, so hopefully that kind of gives you just an overview on what it is. But hopefully I haven't bored you to death. I get a little bit rambly sometimes, but that's what I've got. So I am happy to try to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Julie. That was a great presentation. We did answer a lot of them. Morton, I did answer a lot while you were talking. But if anybody has any other questions for Julie. Well, as I said, next week, it's the same link. So save your email. That exact same link will work again next week. And we'll be starting with District Forester Jim Ferrandi out of the Greenville office, and he'll be covering tree ID. And then we'll have an hour with Joseph Roy, who is the IF&W wildlife biologist. Yes, Niles, we are recording this, and we hope to get it up on our either on the website or our YouTube channel. You're welcome. Another thing that I want to point out, if you probably saw the agenda in the chat, but if there are other topics that you would like to have us talk about, we're happy to put together a one-off recording, just a couple hours in an evening on one topic, if that's something that you're interested in that we're not going to be covering. So certainly feel free to either put it in the chat or email one of us. My email, I put it in there, is terry.r.coulong@maine.gov. And or you can send it to Julie, or Alyssa Gregory just wrote something in there. She is one of our district foresters, or Jim Ferranti, or Morton Mosswild, or I think Kenny Ferguson is on here too. So we're all district foresters, or I'm a regional enforcement coordinator, but used to be a district forester. And we'd be happy to put that in the pile of topics that we can talk about. The name of our YouTube channel. Sure, go ahead, Jen. Jen wanted to plug the Maine Woodland Owners. She works for Maine Woodland Owners. So Jen, go ahead and you can unmute yourself and talk if you'd like.
Cool. Cool. Hi. I'm going to actually put the website on the chat. Have everybody check out our website. There's a lot of things on there. We have a lot of great events coming up. We actually have a Woodland 101 program coming up in June. And we have an online program about people who just purchased land or just starting to get land, or looking for land. And it's called You Just Got Land, Now What? So it's going to be an online hour-long chat, kind of car talkish. And the information is on our website. So I'm going to post that now.
Thanks, Jen. We appreciate it. And again, just a reminder, I know we're throwing an awful lot of information at you, but feel free to call your district forester. You don't necessarily have to have them come out and do a walk and talk, but we love to do that. But just with questions as well, we're happy to talk on the phone.